Hello, nice to meet you. Up until the last session, I shared my child's experiences during kindergarten and elementary school. And starting today, I will be sharing experiences from my child's middle school years after coming to Canada. Among those, I have selected some topics that you might be curious about as follows. First, how we chose a school. Second, how we supported academics. Third, how we supported social skills and relationships. Fourth, I will talk about after-school life and the use of autism funding. First, I will talk about how we chose a school. Since our child attended a private school, we do not have experience with public schools or homeschooling, so I'm not trying to compare public, homeschool, or private schools, but rather to share our experience. For those considering public schools or homeschooling instead of private schools, this may not seem directly relevant, but I still hope our experience can be helpful to you. When we decided to immigrate to Canada, the thing we paid the most attention to was choosing a school. Families with children who have developmental disabilities might also be considering coming to Canada through immigration or studying abroad, and I think the concerns I had would probably apply similarly to them. Even people who have already been living in Canada probably have quite a few concerns about choosing a school. I think sharing the process we went through and why we chose this particular school might be helpful for those people. The first thing we considered was which region we should move to. First of all, since I won't be able to be with my family for the first 2 years, they'll have to travel back and forth during school breaks. We thought the West Coast would be better than the East Coast because it would be a bit easier for traveling. Another reason is that when we studied in the US, we were on the East Coast, and back then the winters were extremely cold and lasted almost 6 months. So we thought it would be better to choose a warmer region rather than a cold one, and that's why we decided on the West Coast. The second reason is that the main reason we're immigrating is for our child. So we wanted an environment that would be suitable for our child to adapt to. Among those factors, the most important is the school. So the question was on what basis we should choose a school. The criteria we set, as I briefly mentioned earlier regarding elementary school, was that relationships and social skills are important. So we wanted a school that fits those values. So we came up with a few criteria. It would be nice if it was a small school with a family-like atmosphere. The second was that it would be good if it were a school that provides Christian education. I also asked our child about it. I asked our child whether going to a Christian school would be good or bad, and our child also said that a Christian school would be nice. And we thought it would be better if there were fewer changes in the environment rather than frequent ones. So once enrolled, we hoped our child could attend the same school all the way through to high school graduation. So those kinds of schools are usually called K-12 schools, where kindergarten through high school graduation are all together. Because of that, we naturally started looking for small private Christian schools. In fact, since we had Canadian permanent residency, there would have been no cost if our child attended a public school. But since we immigrated for our child, we thought the most important thing was the school then. So we chose a private school. The school we found that way was a small Christian school located in White Rock, Vancouver. At that time, there was one class per grade, with about 20 students in each class, and since the school covered from kindergarten to 12th grade, the total number of students was only around 300, making it a small, family-like school. After choosing the school like this, our eldest child also enrolled in the same school. And since the house needed to be close to the school, we chose the nearest possible place to live. The reason for this was that, as a mom supporting the kids, I didn't want the rides to be too exhausting. So that's how we made our decision. At that time, I helped with the arrangements, but since our child couldn't speak English well, I felt a bit sorry about sending them to school. So even though it was my first time meeting the homeroom teacher, I went to see her and told her that on the day our child started school, I would like to introduce our child to the class. I remember telling the classmates to please take good care of our child. It must have been a rather strange sight, especially for the students who were there. But I felt that was about all I could do, so that's what I did. My child wasn't very good at English and also lacked social skills, so I often think about how hard it must have been for them to get by at that school. Looking back now, I feel so proud and grateful that my child managed to overcome such a bit difficult situation. For the first 2 years after my child came to Canada, I was living apart from my family, so I don't know exactly how my child spent those 2 years. So I asked my wife to talk about what was good and what was disappointing during those first 2 years. She said that what she liked was that it was a small, family-like school, so it was very friendly, which she really appreciated. As for what was disappointing, she said that when we first came to Canada, we had so little information that if we had gotten a private diagnosis, right away we could have received autism funding earlier and supported our child better. But because we didn't know, we missed out on about a year of autism funding, which was really unfortunate. She also mentioned that even after we received the funding, it was difficult because we didn't know how to use it properly. The period when I started living with my child in Canada was from the time my child reached school age. When we first came to Canada, I also worked at a company for 2 years, so I couldn't be deeply involved in my child's education. What I mainly did was help my child with their studies in the evenings. Now, let me talk about the second point, how we supported our child academically. My wife and I were both responsible for academic support. I took charge of subjects like English and social studies, which are in the humanities, while my wife helped with math and science, which are in the sciences. Usually people hire tutors to help with academics, but even then, it's only once or twice a week. If you were to have a tutor for 4 or 5 hours every day, even at just $25 an hour, that would be $500 a week, and in a month, it would quickly add up to $2,000, a significant expense. Aside from the cost, it was also difficult to find a tutor who could dedicate 4 or 5 hours every evening. So, although we weren't perfect, we studied together and helped our child with homework and exam preparation. We focused more on previewing the material rather than reviewing it. The reason was that if our child went into class already knowing even a little bit of the material, it would be easier to keep up with the lessons and help build confidence. To share one experience here, as the grade level increases in subjects like English or social studies, the difficulty rises. So by 8th or 9th grade, it becomes really hard for students to do homework and prepare for exams on their own. It's the same for math and science. It's especially difficult because a lot of abstract concepts are introduced. It's really hard for kids to study and fully understand all this material. So what we did to help was read together and provide summarized notes. And when we asked our child to explain what they understood, either verbally or in writing, they found it a bit challenging. So we had our child draw a little, asking them to illustrate what they understood through pictures. That's because children with autism tend to understand images better than text. They're called visual learners. However, the most important thing to be careful about when helping in this way is not to push the child too hard and never to get angry or scold them. Of course, I have my own temperament, so I haven't always been gentle, but I do try to be. In fact, my opinion is that if you can't be gentle, it's actually better not to help at all, because it can cause a lot of stress and even trauma for the child. And since our situation can't be exactly the same as other families, you have to make the best choice according to your own circumstances. The reason we help with academics is not so much to improve our child's grades, but because we believe that by building self-esteem, it will help them strengthen relationships with other friends. No matter how much we help, it's difficult for our child to be at the top of the class. What's important here is that the child does their best and also learns to accept the results. I heard that when that child didn't get good results, they would get angry at school and sometimes even tear up their test papers. Although they went through such difficulties, over time, little by little, things gradually improved. Actually, I think this is also somewhat related to expectations. If we set our goal at 100 points, we get upset even if we score 90. But if our goal was 50 points, we'd be satisfied even with 55. So I think it's important to set appropriate goals that suit the child. And as I mentioned earlier, the best thing is to focus on the process rather than being fixated on the results. As for other subjects like art, music, or physical education, there weren't any major issues because our child actually enjoys them. Especially since our child is talented in art, art class was a time that really boosted their confidence. We also taught them the clarinet, so they were able to participate in the school band. With the school band activities, even if you're not very good, you can still take part. They weren't very good at physical education, but since it's about playing together outside, there wasn't any major problem. So personally, I wish that children with autism could have more time for arts and physical education rather than regular academic subjects, but the problem is that it's difficult for schools to tailor things to suit our children, and that's a bit disappointing. Now, for the third point, I'll talk about how we supported social skills and relationships. As I've been saying, the area we focused on the most was relationships and social skills. In fact, even helping with things like choosing a school or supporting academic areas, as I mentioned earlier, is ultimately a means to improve social skills and relationships. It's no exaggeration to put it that way. To help improve relationships, what we did was invite our child's classmates to their birthday party. When inviting them, you shouldn't insist on holding the party exactly on the birthday. Instead, choose a day when the other children are not busy with other commitments. You should avoid times when there are school events, exam periods, or when many families are on vacation, and instead choose a time when there are no special events so that friends can come together if invited. Of course, it should still be around the same season as your child's birthday. When we first hosted a birthday party in Canada, we scheduled it exactly on our child's birthday, but only 2 friends showed up, which was disappointing. Of course, our child still got along well with those 2 friends, and actually having just a few friends come had its own advantages too. Still, up until about middle school, other kids also invite all their classmates to their birthday parties. So when we invite them, those friends also invite our child to their own birthday parties. I don't have experience with public schools, so I'm not sure, but I think maybe we were able to do this because it was a small school. What was a bit disappointing here was that there were no best friends or group of friends to meet up with after school. So to try to address this, we discussed with the teachers at school and actually created something like a leadership program. So we created a program where our child and other children who needed support could make friends together, and we also set up a system to praise those who participated voluntarily. However, the program didn't last very long. Anyway, what I want to say is that we tried many different things. Now, let me tell you a bit about what our child did after school. As I've mentioned repeatedly, we focused on improving our child's social skills in every area. Since children are usually very tired after coming home from school, I don't think it's good to have them do too many activities after school. Looking back and recalling our child's after-school routine, I think he would first relax by watching his favorite TV programs after coming home from school. Listening to my child, I later found out that watching those TV programs really helped improve his English a lot. It turned out to be a great thing, since he was able to improve his English communication skills while doing something he enjoyed. If we had been overly focused on studying, I wonder if our child might have had a harder time. Maybe we would have told him not to watch TV, hired a tutor, or made him do other programs. And after dinner, he would study what was necessary together with us. I think he probably felt quite a bit of stress at that time. Even so, I am truly grateful to our child for enduring it so well. If your child does something after school, I hope it's something they enjoy and a time for them to relieve any difficulties they've had. Spending time with friends, doing things they like, or learning something they're interested in, these are all really good things. Of course, if it's something necessary for improving your child's social skills, it's important to make sure it's at a level they can handle. If it goes beyond what your child can handle, it will be very difficult for them. That's why we thought of this as communication. When it comes to improving social skills, even if the child doesn't like it, we felt that communication is an area where it's okay to give them a little push. So one of the things we did using autism funding was to schedule time with an English-speaking BI so that our child could have everyday conversations in English. We arranged for them to talk with a Canadian BI about typical topics friends discuss, like how to have conversations when meeting friends, what their hobbies are, and so on. We thought this would help improve both English skills and social skills. And we also used autism funding to attend an English academy called Sylvan, where our child could spend more time learning English. Regarding the use of autism funding, I'd like to mention that at first, since we didn't know much, we just left everything up to the BC, the behavioral consultant. We told the BC everything we wanted. We expected that just by telling them, everything would work out, so we had very high expectations. As a result, since the BC couldn't refuse our requests within the given budget and time, trying to accommodate everything caused the focus to become scattered. Later, when we were concerned about how our child could improve social skills or prepare for adulthood after graduating high school, we asked to see all the schedules that our BC was running. And we found that things were really spread out, so they could only allocate about 10 minutes to each activity. so we decided to remove all the other areas. We stopped asking for things like help with math or English, and instead we asked the BC to focus solely on the area of social skills. So, as I mentioned earlier, we focused on areas like everyday English conversation, creating opportunities to play with other friends, and developing social skills. In conclusion, what really remains after graduation is ultimately social skills, relationships, and communication. So, I believe it's better to focus on social skills and communication rather than just academics or grades at school. This is what I have learned while raising my own child. Thank you for watching until now. Next time, I will share my experiences from the high school years. Thank you.